Hi everyone and welcome to Diana and the Written Words. Not so long ago, everything I read was scientific articles, so I thought I'd use that habit today to read an article about how we read and how our brains construct meaning from what we read. This one was published in spring 2020. The author is MacRae, and it was published in Anglistic International Journal of English Studies. The title is very long, like most academic articles. It's called Imagining Differently: Relationships Between Reading and Gaming Habits, Mental Imagery Construction, and Perspective Taking When Processing a Fictional Narrative Scene. The article starts by talking about two terms. One is this mental imagery, which would be the construction of images when we are consuming media. So in this case, it's talking about reading. The article also talks about gaming, but I'm going to focus on reading today in the interest of time. The other concept is called need for cognition, and is the tendency of engaging with processes that require a high level of cognition. So in this case, reading requires us to create images and put ourselves in the minds of the characters, understand what's happening. So that's a high level of cognition, of mental capacity that's needed in order to read and understand the text. So as the need for cognition. This article starts talking about other data, and it says that based on what other researchers have found, it seems that people that read more frequently are able to create this mental imagery in a way that's richer than people that don't read as frequently, and that people that aren't frequent readers might not even be able to create this imagery as a result of reading, which makes the process less engaging, less interesting, and it also requires them more effort to engage with the text. They tested this hypothesis by getting people to read a short text, and they then had to answer a series of questions of whether they had created imagery as a result of reading this text, how this imagery was constructed, or if they didn't have any imagery. And sure enough, they found that those people that claimed that they read more often had a higher tendency to create images. They then go a bit further and they say that, again, based on what other people have published, those that are more frequent readers also have more capacity to put themselves in the minds of the characters, to the point that the imagery that they're constructing, they see those images from the point of view of the character. People that don't read that often would either not create imagery, we saw in the previous experiment or with the previous hypothesis, or would be able to create this imagery, but it would be less rich and it would tend to be from further away. So their point of view as they're imaging is further away from the action than those people that read more frequently. They do say that this putting yourself in the place of the character is also affected by other variables, and they don't really know how they are interconnected, but that this might depend on the tense of the text, whether it's in the past or the present, would affect how much we are able to see ourselves as the character. And the voices would also change how we see ourselves. So whether it's in first or second person voice would seem to engage more the reader. So people would have a higher tendency of seeing themselves as the character if the text is in first or second person as opposed to third person. It is true, though, that some texts in third person they talk in third person, but the main character is talking through that third person. So one example of this is Harry Potter. And I know that myself, when reading Harry Potter, I was creating this imagery and putting myself as a stalker behind Harry. I was following the action from the same point of view as Harry, but just standing behind him rather than being him. So that does seem to suggest that there is less of a tendency in third person, at least in my case. So they tested this hypothesis by having those people reading that text, and then they had to match the different images that they saw to those that more closely matched the ones that they imagined. And this way, they were able to see that, yes, the hypothesis is true in the sense that people that read more often had a higher tendency to be the character when they were creating this imagery, which I thought was really interesting because we engage in such different ways with texts and it depends on so many things. But if we are able to see that, if with our imaginations we are able to be the main character, to me that means that there's a very high engagement with the text. Now, of course, with this article, you can think of why some people don't like reading or don't read very often. That might be because they're not used to creating these images and therefore the process doesn't make as much sense. And reading isn't enjoyable because they're not as able to create these images around the reading and therefore they aren't able to put themselves in the action and enjoy it as a result of that. So let me know what you thought of this. I thought it was fairly interesting, and I certainly am going to think more about how I myself create those images when I read and how that depends on the text that I'm reading. Let me know if you see yourself as the main character and what books you've read lately that have made you either see yourself as the character or has made you really not engage with the character and see the whole plot from very far away in your images, or if you weren't even able to create those images because you weren't engaging with the text. Thank you very much for listening. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe and do all those things.